Polyfidelity. What the heck is that? Most people have to look it up.
Welcome to a video with Raederle.
Let's clean this up.
This is so exciting!
I've read some of the latest and most insightful books about polyamory and emotional intelligence, and yet nothing explains jealousy the way I'm gonna lay it out for you. Many of the concepts in this video come directly out of 15 years of introspection, journaling, meditation, and working with people. In order to explain polyfidelity, I'm gonna have to cover a lot of ground. We'll be discussing the nature of emotions, what emotional safety is, how boundaries relate, the practical purpose of emotions like jealousy and anger, what cheating actually means, the difference between relational strategies and relational philosophies, how neurodivergence impacts polyamory, and much more. All throughout, I'm going to give you a lot of examples to ground these abstract concepts in reality. Almost everything I say in this video applies to relationships in general. The things that I have to say about emotional safety, addressing jealousy, and creating agreements isn't just for your intimate relationships. Almost all of it also applies to parent-child relationships, sibling relationships, friend groups, and other social structures. As you'll see, polyfidelity implies a philosophy that expands beyond structural frameworks. Throughout this video, there will often be more text on the screen than you are likely to be able to read in the time provided. This is to give the video rewatch value, so that it's still interesting when you watch it again with your partner, and maybe even a third time with your other partner. First, what is monogamy? Mono, meaning one, means you're with one partner. Two partners folded together. Polyamory can be multiple loves, and it's kind of like all three of them get folded together. Except a lot of people do network polyamory, where you're not actually folded together. Oh, I have this partner here, and this other partner here, and this other partner here, and in fact those other partners don't touch each other, but I touch all of them. So then there's this broader umbrella called E&M, that's ethical non-monogamy. And the ethical part means they're being transparent and honest about it, and they are not getting into relationships with people who are not okay with that. I find that most people who are using this term, however, are not usually practicing polyamory, which means many loves. Though in my experience, when they write E&M on their dating profile, they often mean that they are not looking for a relationship with a lot of commitment or a lot of depth. Very common among people with perhaps an avoidant attachment style. For more on that, you can watch my video on attachment styles. Another form of ethical non-monogamy is being swingers. This is your usual partner. Tonight, you can go with this person and I can go with that person. And it's just for the night and it's just sex and you're like not allowed to have feelings about them. And with them you have emotional fidelity, but you do not have sexual fidelity. Quick clarification from editor Raederle here. I should have said exclusivity. Fidelity means that you are loyal. Loyalty is not synonymous with sexual exclusivity. Well, we're swingers, but we only swing with this other couple. That means that you've developed some kind of safety with this, and at that point you are actually kind of moving into polyamory territory, because now there is a certain level of added emotional content. If you swing with them a lot, you basically all have two relationships. And so we call that a quad. When I say network polyamory, I'm using that as an umbrella to describe both what some people call parallel poly as well as garden party poly. So I knew this one network where there was a kissing in hands rule, which meant you were allowed to kiss and hold hands and do anything else with your hands before testing or before being accepted into the network. And the rule for being accepted into the network was you had to get a specific panel of 8 different tests, and then you had to give your results to the network. If the network said, oh, this is okay, then you could proceed past kissing in hands. Here we have some monogamous couples over here. Here we have some unpaired up people. I'm this one. Let's say I get into this relationship. Well, this relationship's great, but some of our lifestyle stuff is not compatible. Turns out that maybe I actually do want to sleep next to someone, but I can't sleep next to this partner. I find this friend who I can sleep next to, and maybe this becomes such a great friend that they move in with us. I'm still monogamous, and this is the partner I sleep with, like sexually, but this is the partner I sleep with non-sexually. Why do I say partner? If you're like in bed with this person every night, kinda is a relationship, I would think. So the primary difference between network polyamory and polyfidelity is that in the network, there's usually something like, here's these simple rules about physical protection regarding sex, like condoms and testing, whereas with polyfidelity, there is usually more emotional rules about what is going to keep all of the people who are in this polycule emotionally safe.
So most of us know what the concerns around physical safety are when it comes to polyamory.
We're going to be sharing potentially diseases with this new partner. Does this new partner have HPV or HIV or anything else? Are they on medications that are going to be protective? Are condoms going to be used or not? If not, what are the protections, precautions? Do the people in this polycule meaning the constellation, does the polycule feel safe about all of this? Maybe this person's still not sexually involved, but even so, if you're sleeping next to someone, there actually are transmitted diseases besides COVID that you can get from just having a lot of skin-to-skin contact with somebody. So what does it even mean to be emotionally safe? Emotional safety is when you can trust the other people around you to care about what is in your best interest. In other words, if it is not in your best interest as a neurodivergent to have a sudden loud sound, creating emotional safety for, let's say, me, would involve things like asking if it's okay for you to run a vacuum or a blender before doing so, and giving me the opportunity, if I'm already feeling overstimulated, to leave the room. As you can imagine, creating emotional safety with strangers is virtually impossible. This is why people often feel uncomfortable around strangers. People feel most comfortable around strangers when the mainstream culture is very similar to themselves. The more similar you are to what culture expects of everybody, the more you can expect that common decency will be good enough for you. As some sort of neurodivergent, it can be extremely dangerous to be in close proximity with other people who don't know you, because they may not understand that them frying onions could be really dysregulating for you. And so they're just trying to go about their normal needs, doing things that they can reasonably expect other people to be okay with. Meanwhile, their actions are completely dysregulating you. As you can imagine, this makes polyamory particularly difficult for neurodivergence. It takes more time to develop trust. Furthermore, trust becomes more based on the verbal exchanges you have with people. It's not just, oh, I've been around you and I've noticed that you seem to be a respectful person, which often is how people develop rapport, is you're around this person and they seem to be okay when you're around them. This is why familiarity can just build trust over time. However, if you have more specialized or unusual needs, let's say you have PTSD about some things that happened as a child that cause you to be extremely triggered by common content in movies or books, and people talk about movies and books all the time. When I mention trauma or PTSD in this video, I'm using it in the broadest sense, which includes adverse experiences which may not seem to warrant the word trauma at first blush. However, modern research shows that much of what we have culturally dismissed as insignificant childhood upsets have just as much negative impact on our adult health as the capital T traumas, such as physical abuse. In order for you to get to a place of safety, you have to explain verbally, these things are triggers for me, and then the other person has to consent to not bring up those triggers, and they have to follow through. This makes building trust a lot harder. So it's not just neurodivergence, it's anyone who has unusual lifestyle choices. If you are a vegan, or maybe you just have an ick feeling about raw meat, then you might not feel safe living with people who eat meat at all, or maybe you just feel uncomfortable because you're not sure if those people are going to be conscientious about whether they're chopping raw meat on your cutting board. When it comes to polyamory, the whole chopping raw meat on someone else's cutting board really is kind of similar to how people emotionally feel about sharing their partners physically. So let's talk about jealousy. There is sort of a myth that jealousy is bad. Of course, we have this about a lot of emotions. We tend to think that anger is bad, jealousy is bad, panic is bad, anxiety is bad. That is the programming that we have been given. And it's kind of fair that we've been given this programming because a lot of times people do things that they later regret when they're under the influence of these emotions. But let's talk about the valid and important reasons why these emotions exist. So why get jealous? So in life, there are things where we gain something and we feel pleasure, or we lose something and we feel bad. I know it sounds oversimplified, but I'm just talking about like basic building blocks here. Most of life is a complex mixture of gains and losses. When we have a simple gain, like I just got an ice cream cone that I like, oh, I feel good. And then if we drop the ice cream cone on the ground, now we're like, oh, I feel bad. Things start getting really complicated when we resist the emotion. The experience of processing that we've lost something is grief. But when we can't process that we've lost something, we might fall into despair instead. Despair is a sense of hopelessness. Grief is acceptance. It's I have lost this and I am accepting it and I'm moving into this new reality where I don't have this thing anymore. So the difficult thing about life is we're often not given enough space to feel grief. We talk about the stages of grief, but those are actually the stages leading up to us actually experiencing the grief itself. Having been through a lot of intense grief in 2024 that lasted all year long, one of the things that was the most profoundly interesting was that it wasn't actually the grief that lasted all year. Most of my time, minute to minute, day by day, was spent resisting the grief. That's where jealousy comes in. Jealousy and anger and panic are all different flavors of resisting loss. We're saying, I think I might be losing this thing, but what if I fight really hard and then I wouldn't lose that thing? Anger says, if only I'm just fierce enough, if only I fight hard enough, then this cage that I'm trapped in will be broken. And it's perfect if you are in a literal cage and if you just put enough energy against this cage, like let's say it's made out of bamboo, you can probably break it if you put enough fierce energy into trying. Despair is what happens when we realize we can't. And grief is what happens when we accept, like really accept, that this is the reality and how do I move forward. Panic is about the ambiguous loss. Let's say something is caught on fire. There is the possibility that if I act fast enough, do something crazy enough right now, maybe you prevent your house from burning down. Then maybe the loss will not have occurred or won't occur in the future. So things get really interesting when it comes to jealousy, however. There is some amount of loss, like as in my partner is not present right now, my partner is not paying attention to me right now, or my partner is not fulfilling a need that I have right now. I wish these things were the case in my relationship, like I wish that my partner had more sex with me, but now my partner is having sex with someone else. So there's usually some inadequacy or loss already. Like your partner used to be romantic and bring you flowers, but now they don't anymore, but now they're bringing flowers to someone else. There's the ambiguity of what is going to happen in the future. This creates jealousy, which is a form of panic. It can also include aspects of anger and despair mixed in. Despair might be like, I'm helpless to fix this situation. If your agreements say that, yes, they can be with this other person, especially in like network polyamory, you've agreed that they're allowed to sleep with whoever they wish as long as they've fulfilled certain testing or they're using a condom. Maybe you have an agreement that date night for you is Tuesday night. Okay, well, it's a Wednesday night. They're with this other person. And maybe they usually spend Wednesday nights with you anyway, even though it's not officially date night, but now they're spending it with this other person who's new in their life. You can feel despair because you know if you push back against them having this relationship, they're going to say, hey, you're treading on my autonomy. I'm not cool with that. And maybe they will leave you. However, I feel like a lot of jealousy really isn't about the extreme of I will leave you. It's more like I will emotionally withdraw from you. I won't be as close to you. I won't respect you as much as I did before you tread on my autonomy. We all hear a lot about that potential loss that jealousy is supposedly all about. However, I think this is actually the lesser focus. Instead, we should look at what already is not working in the relationship. When somebody new comes into the picture, anything you are giving to the new person, time, attention, affection, money, anything you're buying for them, all of those things now bring into question whether or not the existing partner is getting their own needs met. So literally anything that you do for the new partner is taking away from something you theoretically could be giving to the existing partner. And so the existing partner will suddenly feel jealous simply because their needs are not getting met at the current present moment. And so all these things that they were just resigned to because clearly you didn't have enough energy after work, you didn't have enough time after taking care of the kids, whatever it was, before it was like, well, my partner can't give me more. But now when you're giving it to someone else, clearly you have that energy. A lot of times you fall in love and you suddenly get new energy because you've just freshly fallen in love. But
For the pre-existing partner, however, the new energy that you have because of you falling in love with someone else is like a betrayal. Like, whatever happened to you feeling that way about me? Why do you feel that way about someone else? Why am I not good enough anymore? Another rarely explored aspect of jealousy is how a person's values and personality often shifts when they become highly involved in a new person. There's a saying that goes that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So if your top 5 people has a shift, then generally speaking, this will change your behavior, including even the vocabulary you use. This can cause existing relationships to feel very different to the person who is not in a new relationship in particular. For the partner who is in a new relationship, sometimes they don't even realize how much they're changing and how fast. This can feel extremely destabilizing, especially for a highly neurodivergent partner who has specific needs that maybe you were really good about meeting, and now maybe you're more forgetful, particularly as the behaviors required by the new partner are different. So why is it that when it comes to emotional safety and multiple relationships, that having sex with other people is the main thing that makes people feel tremendously unsafe? Stereotypically, women are more emotionally vulnerable in general as a baseline, and men are usually more physically available sexually than women are. This creates scarcity for the stereotypical situation of straight people with a man wants a woman's body, but there's scarcity around how much he can have her body, and the woman wants the man's vulnerability, but there's scarcity around how much she can have that. Because of this, and because the woman associates sex with emotional vulnerability, and that's often the only time she can get emotional vulnerability from her partner, as a result, she is jealous because of the emotional vulnerability of him having sex with someone else, and he is usually jealous about her having sex with someone else because it's the scarcity of he already wishes he could have her body more than he gets to have it. Because of the scarcity, it feels very grating to have somebody give away something that's yours and you already don't get enough of it. So it's kind of like you're malnourished in this way, and now they're going to give it to someone else. Even if it doesn't change the amount that you're getting, the idea that there is now more of it theoretically happening or available, but it's just not available to you. A lot of times the specific jealousy is around specific sex acts. Agreements around that need to be made. So it's like, okay, well, as long as you're not doing this particular kink activity with this other person, I feel safe. That could be what somebody's requirement is. Sex represents our emotional vulnerability. We're taking off the layers of clothing. Various things are symbolically part of our armor, and they tend to correlate very strongly to our actual emotional armor. Even wearing makeup can be a form of armor because it helps us be psychologically guarded or in a different mind frame. Maybe it helps us connect with one of our protector parts. You can see my video thumbnail says this is hypnosis, also known as the Claudia video, where I talk about how the way we present ourselves helps us hypnotically get into a different state of mind, which is why somebody might be so jealous about you doing a certain kink activity with someone else, because they want to share that type of vulnerability with you, and it's threatening to them to imagine that that is being given away to someone else. And that usually means we already feel like we don't have enough of that in our own life. Why is vulnerability so important? In order to feel connected to other people, you have to have vulnerability. You can imagine 2 people are dressed up in all of this armor and they go to hug each other and there's this big clang and you can't really get close. There's no softness. Everything's hard, loud, rigid. That's kind of what it's like when we go to people emotionally guarded. We kind of feel like we're just 2 clangs of armor just slamming into each other. And if you come into this and you're naked and they're wearing armor, it's going to be uncomfortable for you. The depth of your relationships is limited by how vulnerable you are willing to get. If you're not willing to get vulnerable at all, then your relationships are limited at being very shallow. In order to feel deeply connected with other people, in order to feel like this sort of mythical, mystical, magical type of romantic, intimate connection, in order to feel that like warm glowing throughout your chest, to feel suffused with well-being due to this amazing bond you have with someone, you have to be able to be vulnerable with them. How do we get to the point where neither of us are armored? If you don't feel emotionally safe with someone, you're not going to want to be vulnerable with that person. While this more stereotypically is the case with women, that they have to experience emotional vulnerability and emotional safety in order to want to be sexually involved, I've experienced this also a lot with men, especially neurodivergent men, who also strongly need to feel the sense of emotional safety in order to want to be physically intimate, because the intimacy physically feels very vulnerable. Creating emotional safety around sharing a sexual partner requires removing scarcity. Either you need to find a way to be more emotionally or physically available to your partner, or they have to be able to get those needs met elsewhere before they're going to be comfortable with you sharing yourself emotionally or physically with someone else. Not everyone experiences jealousy. However, it's important to be aware that sometimes someone doesn't experience jealousy, not because they fail to feel insecure or threatened by a new relationship that you might have with someone else, but because they don't feel enough empowerment to feel that jealousy would behoove them. Therefore, at a subconscious level, they go directly to despair instead of jealousy, feeling that there's nothing that they can do. So a lot of times we feel despair in relationships because we feel trapped in a way that we know we can't fix. Despair is sometimes referred to by some people as a very low vibrational state. Above it is anger. Anger is an improvement from despair. Despair says there's nothing possible. I cannot break free of this cage. Anger says if I try hard enough, I can break free. Now, anger might be willing to leave the relationship if you don't get your own needs met. And that's why sometimes we end up doing things we regret when we're really angry, because maybe part of us would rather be a little bit unhappy in the relationship than lose it. But the part of us that's angry has decided, no, this cage is not acceptable and I'm going to break it no matter what. Of course, there's going to be a million variations, first of all, on emotions, and second of all, on polyamorous relationships, and third of all, in how these things interact. So any of these examples I give might be a close match to something you've experienced, but not 100% on, of course. This all goes back to emotional safety. If your relationship is causing you to feel panicked, anxious, angry, jealous, you're not feeling safe in the relationship. A lot of people's solution to this is don't do polyamory, be with one person. However, polyfidelity is specifically about people who would like to have the possibility of having multiple partners, or they would like to have a larger household, or they would like to have a sense of more community, or they would like their partner to be able to have other partners, and they would also like to feel emotionally safe. If you look up the internet definition of polyfidelity, you're going to find these things that talk about a closed loop structure. This makes absolutely no sense. Obviously, at some point you have to get into the structure in the first place. It's not as if four people just meet each other and then they all decide right away to get into a quad or some sort of polyfidelitous structure that they now stay in permanently forever. This is unrealistic, and I've never encountered it. We can think of it instead as something that changes slowly and gradually. In a polyfidelity context, we say, hey, we want to know this person, we want to trust this person. When we look at a consensus process, it is normally the case that things evolve in a slower fashion, taking the time for every single person to get clear about their own boundaries and then to negotiate with everyone around them. Negotiating boundaries is not the same as, oh, I'm going to sacrifice my boundaries and compromise myself in order for you to be happy. Negotiating boundaries is having awareness that sometimes your boundaries will change in light of new information. So once you become aware that your behavior is hurting another person and you have empathy for them, often your boundaries and desires automatically shift. It's not that you consciously tried to force yourself into something that you didn't like. We really have to be able to be honest with ourselves about what our boundaries are and what we need, and also to be honest about where our flexibility is, because there's no workability in the relationship if all you ever say is, this is what I need, hard, clear cut. Being willing to figure out where you can bend a little bit is very important, but you also need to be honest about and put on the table what is it that you are risking by saying, all right, I'll try this. A closely related concept is relationship synarchy. Now, you may have heard of relationship anarchy, which acknowledges that all relationships don't fit into boxes, and there's room for relationships that might involve a kiss that is more than platonic but less than sexual. While relationship anarchy acknowledges this, it falls short of recognizing the true ecosystem that exists in a social species. My well-being is not independent from your well-being. I had the great fortune of meeting pioneer Alexis, who came up with this brilliant idea known as relationship synarchy. Synarchy meaning co-rulership. We create collectively the reality for our social network. Because your needs are not independent from my needs, it's a process and it's always evolving. It's something that we tend together. Me thriving isn't something I go do by myself. It's something that I do in community with all of the members of my Polycule. Both relationship anarchy and this evolution of it, relationship synarchy, are both more about philosophy rather than about rule structure. It's fair to say that I am a relationship synarchist who likes a structure of polyfidelity, i.e. a consensus-based, slow evolving structure.
So as much as I love a great chart that plots things out like emotional exclusivity and sexual exclusivity and plots everything out on it,
I feel like I can't possibly give you enough disclaimers about how many exceptions there are to this chart. The thing is, one person's open marriage could be here, another one could be more like here. It really just depends so much on the individuals, and it should depend on the individuals.
technically there's also how much are we going to co-create versus operate more independently. And that would be like a whole third axis to measure relationships on.
So now we get to the million-dollar question.
How the heck do you create emotional safety? Emotional safety is notoriously complicated. People have all kinds of different things that make them feel safe or unsafe. So for example, communication styles. I have had one partner who preferred very direct communication that was very literal. Concrete types tend to really want things to be hands-on, and T-types also tend to be a little bit more literal and rational, as opposed to emotional or poetic. That's all well and good. I learned to speak more concretely. This was really great for developing communication skills. However, I simultaneously had another partner who preferred to have a lot of background context, a lot of like lead in, a lot of like almost hedging about like what exactly are we talking about. It's like the exact opposite. It was very difficult for me to learn a whole new mode of speaking in the first place, but then switching back and forth was extremely difficult for me. So maintaining emotional safety with both people was particularly challenging. What's funny about this is that the issue wasn't with my compatibility with each of them individually, or even the compatibility of the two of them talking to each other, because the two of them talking to each other didn't have a problem. The issue was with how it changed me to be around one of them for a long time. Humans are a very socially dependent species. I would like to see a world where we take the time to really get to know what other people need. When it comes to getting to know other people deeply and learning their boundaries and making agreements, it's super important that you make sure that you're actually talking about the same thing. Sometimes you use a term like unicorn and you think it's really clear, and the other person has a notion that looks similar, but it's not quite a match. For example, let's say that you agree that you're going to spend holidays together. Make sure that you agree on both what the word holiday means as well as together. Because when you find the actual matches, it clears up a tremendous number of disagreements and confusion. Get in the habit of asking, what exactly does that term mean to you? One of the partners that I have had does not want to appear in any of my content, whereas another person who you've seen a lot, Lytenian, who has been with me more or less platonically for 15 years, he accepted the fact that I have a strong desire to be online, and I've had an online presence since I was 13 years old. He accepted that he was going to be on the internet. It is awkward when I end up using clips of Lytenian and I together to talk about relationships in general, because most of the time I'm not talking about Lytenian. Some people would like to make it a group decision. Every meal, what are we going to eat together? And every time you make the tiniest little change of the furniture in the house, a big conversation. Personally, I don't need that level of micromanagement. There can be a lot of different dragons to fight when it comes to creating emotional safety for someone. One person's safety is another person's hell. In order to make a new relationship feel emotionally safe to pre-existing partners, you often have to start actually putting more into your existing relationships at the same time. If you cannot afford to do this,
It may cause the existing relationships to break, especially if the pre-existing partner or partners are particularly prone to feeling insecure, neglected, abandoned, anxious, and, of course, jealous. I believe there's a middle ground between coming up with agreements and rules, and also ad hoc in the moment paying attention to what is actually happening and what is actually needed, and being proactive about making the changes required to make everybody in the structure feel the best that they possibly can given the circumstances. And sometimes that's not going to be great, but I also believe in being there through the hard times, and that means showing up with your best for someone who might be in a dark place, and sometimes just holding their hand through it. I feel that being a fair-weathered friend is another way that people sort of cop out with ethical non-monogamy, which doesn't feel very ethical to me at all. If you only bounce around between the partners during times when they're happy, but bounce out the moment they're not happy, that's not even really relationships anymore. That's basically trying to just resource people for your own mood, but not actually treating them as another real human being. To me, that's a form of low-key narcissism. I'm not trying to call you or anybody you know an archetypal narcissist. We have downloaded narcissistic tendencies as part of our cultural programming. The entire ecosystem that we live in socially is built narcissistically. It's defend my boundaries at the expense of your boundaries. Play a zero-sum game. We were all taught to be narcissists. It's my hope that this video helps undo some of that programming. Relationship Synarchy also evolves from Anarchy in such a way that it rejects the idea that power is non-existent somehow. We aren't all just equal players. Hierarchy of some kind always exists, whether or not we impose it. Even if our philosophy is screaming egalitarianism, that doesn't mean that the reality is reflecting that. Power discrepancies don't disappear just because we've rejected hierarchy. Differences in our physical health, our emotional charisma, our tangible resources, all of these differences create hierarchies of power. We have to proactively do something about this in order to make our relational systems feel safe to everyone in them. So if somebody has chronic anxiety, you might have to go through various hoops in order to allow them to share what they're feeling, what they're going through, give them the space. Maybe they need one-on-one time with everybody in the structure. They need it to be not time-bounded, and they need it to be pretty casual. There is no quick fix. You can't just poof make people feel safe. The important thing is that we are working towards equity through recognizing that equality inherently doesn't exist. We are not equal, but we can work to create equity. More important to me than the level of exclusivity of heart and body is the loyalty and the stalwart commitment to the consensus process and making sure that everyone's actually emotionally safe. Making somebody feel safe isn't even as simple as doing what they ask you to do. It's actually being proactive enough to ask them if something is okay or not. And unfortunately, even this isn't universal because some people feel less safe if you keep asking them questions about what makes them feel safe. Yes, I'm suggesting that you shouldn't just ask for consent, but you should ask whether or not the person wants to be asked for consent. Seems very meta, but if you get some of these questions out of the way early in the relationship, on each date, let's say, try to get like 2 of these types of questions in, where you're like, are you the kind of person who likes to make the first move, or do you like the other person to make the first move? Do you like to be asked for consent before being touched each time? And does that change as you get closer to somebody? Because some people do get really annoyed if you're just like, hey, is it okay if I touch your knee? Is it okay if I hug you? Some people are like, dude, if I'm crying, give me a freaking hug. And other people are like, you know, it varies for me. Please ask. And of course, we can't really have a conversation about emotional safety without talking about attachment styles. If a person has been through emotional or physical abuse, including emotional withdrawal from their parents, that can create an insecure attachment style, either avoidant or anxious or both. Stereotypically, what feels best for the anxious person feels worst for the avoidant person and vice versa. I'm beginning to doubt that there's really such a thing as being one or the other without kind of being both, because even if you're completely anxious in your romantic relationships, you'll often notice those same people are super avoidant in their other relationships. Usually people will kind of flip between the two strategies. But the question is, how
how trusting are you able to feel in relationships? The more able you are to feel trusting that your authentic self and your needs are going to be safe in the relationship, the closer you are to being secure. And if this is security, and then the way over here is insecurity, then this is how avoidant and how anxious you are. So you're going to flip between being this avoidant and this anxious depending on context. More or less, there are going to be some exceptions. Whereas if you were this secure, then this is how anxious or avoidant you're going to tend to behave when you're flipping between these strategies. So something I've noticed in myself is I tend to have a flip at 8 p.m. And I tend to switch between being avoidant during the day, and then at 8 p.m., boom, now I'm anxious. It's like there's like a little clock that's like, it's nighttime now. If I was loved by someone, they would be here for me right now. So for me in a relationship, this means that if you can't be with me and you're my primary partner, who is going to be with me? Or have you made me feel so safe in the relationship that I'm okay with being alone? Which I might be if I know that you are just away because you needed to get more sleep because you're sick. But I might not be if you're away because you're with another woman, because that's going to trigger a bunch of other insecurities. And so now it's not just, oh, I'm alone, which I don't necessarily like in the evening. It's I'm alone and what makes me feel safe and makes another person feel safe are going to only have some overlaps. So let's say if your polycule is you and your boyfriend's other girlfriend, that's your polycule, the three of you. And now your Metamour, which is your boyfriend's girlfriend, is considering wanting to date someone else. There's going to be this process where you and your Metamour talk about it. You're going to talk about it in all of the combinations, you and your boyfriend and your Metamour, as well as the three of you together. So that's 4 different conversations right there. And you're all going to have time one-on-one with the new person, as well as in different combinations of the groups of you. Now, why? Because the more time that all of you spend together in your different configurations, the more quickly incompatibilities, orange flags, and red flags might be uncovered. For example, let's say that the new guy is assuming that because you're all in a polycule, that he gets to sleep with whoever he wants to in the polycule. When you spend one-on-one time with him, he starts coming on to you in a way that feels very non-consensual. That's more of an extreme example, but you will uncover things, and some of them won't be big red flags, but you'll only discover that through actually trying things out. Human relationships develop attachment over time. Attachment rupture is incredibly painful. It's arguably one of the most painful things a human can go through. So before everyone gets really attached, it's good to make sure that the people that you're already attached to agree and consent to this new attachment entering the group sphere. And of course, this isn't foolproof. It may be that none of you see any red flags at the time, and then things don't work out later. But at least you aren't bulldozing anyone by ignoring their concerns. When you move forward and some of your existing attachments are not comfortable with you moving forward, then you're already creating attachment ruptures. Whereas if you all discover together that this person actually turns out to not be a good fit, then your existing connections stay strong. We should talk about how this is different from the veto rule. So the veto rule gets a lot of flack because, oh, you wanted to do something, it feels good, you're in love with this new person, and here comes your existing partner being a total cock blocker and being like, no, you can't do this thing that's going to make you happy and more complete. And they're doing this like for no apparent reason, no legitimate reason. If they're saying no to this, first of all, they have a good reason, and we have to address the emotions. Polyfidelity is let's come to consensus. So I live in a consensus-based eco-village, and when we have a proposal, you put on your thinking hat, how can we say yes to this? You find a no in yourself, but when you deliver that no, it's no longer your personal no. It is now owned by the community as an objection, and that objection has to have a reason, so that everyone else can put on their thinking hat of how can this objection be resolved. This is an important difference between the consensus that is inherent in polyfidelity and the veto rule. The veto rule implies that you can give a veto with no explanation. This is the opposite of emotional intimacy. The instinctive recoil against the veto rule is because it bulldozes the boundaries of one party. A boundary is simply your preferences, your needs, what you want. So if you want a new relationship with this new person that you are feeling emotionally excited about, and someone else says no, they just bulldozed your boundaries. However, if you're in a relationship with this person and they don't want you to be in this new relationship because it feels threatening to them, that's a violation of their boundaries.
I believe that anyone who is drawn to having the veto rule as part of polyamory is really looking for polyfidelity and they don't realize it. Because when we're looking for the veto rule to save us, we're looking for a way out of a situation that feels emotionally unsafe. So for either of you to bulldoze each other is going to lead to that person feeling neglected or resentful. So the only way to maintain pre-existing relationships and enter new relationships and have the whole dynamic work for everyone is by nobody getting their boundaries bulldozed. Hence why I'm suggesting a consensus process where we take each other's needs as part of our own needs and we work together with our thinking hats on about how to make it so that the other person can have their needs met at the same time as us. Often when the veto rule appeals to someone, it's partly because they don't feel that consensus is possible. If you've never had deep emotional intimacy with one person, it can be very hard to believe that you can have it with multiple people. If you have not experienced that other people are going to actually caretake your emotions and your emotional safety, you're already preemptively assuming that whatever you feel is not valid enough for the other person to respect it. And so you think that you just have to lay down the law because that's the only way to feel safe. You can't have a consensus process that is there to make everyone feel safe if you're invalidating how anyone feels. All the feelings are valid. Let's try to understand them. We are never here to try to fix the feeling. We're here to try to understand it, because when we approach emotions with curiosity, we get to understand them more and more and more. And as we understand them more deeply, the answers become apparent. Consensus is not an easy process, but it is possible. As I said, I live in an eco-village and we now have roughly 44 adults, and they all have to come to agreement about everything that happens on the 120 acres that we share here. Sometimes just learning about the emotion, just listening, can be enough to resolve somebody's objection. So why does it seem like I'm making it sound like polyfidelity and the consensus process and relationship synarchy are all the same thing? We have to look at the word polyfidelity. We know that poly means many. What is fidelity? Fidelity means loyalty. And what is loyalty really, other than protecting the best interests, the boundaries, and the well-being of the other person? To have many fidelities, polyfidelity, you have to find a way to the best of your ability to maintain deep trust, meaning deep emotional safety with all of the parties whom you have committed to. So as you start resolving the dragons in the relationship, you might find that you start feeling like some of the dragons aren't resolvable. That you try, but there they still are. When that happens, we often can fall into the trap of no longer speaking up, especially if the problem's been persisting for many years with the same people. This is a pretty dangerous place to be, and this happens in monogamy too. Often we are not able to pull ourselves out of it because we've already tried a lot. We need the other person to come to us with a lot more curiosity and just get outside the box. Sometimes you have to think very impractically in order to understand something before you can get to the practical solution. So asking questions like, well, if you could have anything you want, money is no problem, nobody else is going to have feelings about what it is that you want, everyone else is going to be fine, everyone else is going to have their needs met. Let's just talk about you getting your needs met. Sky's the limit, dream as big as possible. What is it that you really want? What would make you feel completely safe, nourished, happy? What would make you feel ecstatic on a regular basis? You have to be able to let those answers just be. They might make you uncomfortable. The whole reason that they're not wanting to share these things or that they've given up on these things is probably because they're so attached to you that they don't want to even bring up the desires they have that conflict with you. This is a huge indication of how much they love you and need you. Use that awareness to allow yourself to remain curious about what their actual truth is. Okay, this is going to be super tempting. When you start getting curious about someone's feelings, you're going to want to rush in and fix it. Unfortunately, that is often the wrong approach because we'll often bulldoze our own boundaries in the process of trying to rush in and fix. Maybe the whole reason they haven't asked for this thing they want is because they know at some level that this is not going to be in alignment with you. So if you rush in there and I'm like, oh, I can do that, then they're going to get even more hurt when it turns out you can't. Being proactive about maintaining your relationships doesn't just mean soliciting input from your partners as often as possible. It means that you actually have to contribute how you feel, which means doing the work, which may be uncomfortable for you, to figure out how do you actually feel about the situation.
What exactly do I need to feel safe in a relationship? What are my boundaries? What are my needs for autonomy?
And putting that on the table. Because if you don't put how you feel on the table, then you are not enabling other people to take your best interest to heart. And when you get upset with them for breaking trust, in other words, for acting outside of your best interest, you can't really be as justifiably upset with them if you never told them how you felt.
Some people are going to be okay with someone else in the relationship who doesn't know their boundaries, and they're going to be okay with looking after that other person's boundaries. Other people aren't. Some people are going to be okay with a relationship where the other person can sleep around and you don't mind, but they mind if you sleep around. You have to create agreements that work for you and the people involved specifically. And literally, no matter what relational style you're practicing, if you break the agreements that you have with your partner, that is cheating. This applies even if you don't remember what those agreements are. Even if you did it unintentionally, you're still cheating, and it causes the emotional damage of cheating. It is very important that you immediately own up to what you did wrong. Say, I am so sorry I cheated on you. I fill in the blank with the truth. You didn't mean to, or you got caught up in the moment, or you desperately wanted this so much that you thought it was more important than this relationship and honoring it, but now you realize your mistake. Cheating is very serious. If you break the agreements you have with other people, it takes a long time to repair trust. You have to explain what you did and why. You have to apologize for it. You have to own it. You have to take accountability for it. And then you have to ask them what would make them feel safe again. And then you have to be able to show up and do that consistently. And maybe in about 6 months, they might be okay. So why do you suppose I brought up cheating? Because if you want lifelong, committed, stable relational structures, then you absolutely need the ability to repair trust. No matter how curious, introspective, understanding, kind, and clear everyone is, there will still eventually be ruptures of trust. People make mistakes. Sometimes you were doing everything that was asked of you, and someone's feelings still get hurt. This is inevitable because most people don't actually know their boundaries. They don't actually know what makes them feel safe. It's more essential to be able to repair trust than it is to be able to never break it. That said, I'm presenting the consensus process because I believe it is one of the most powerful social tools we have for preventing trust ruptures from happening in the first place. I'm going to give you a little bit more background on what I think makes most people usually feel safe. Taking things slower. You don't sleep with somebody on the first date. It may be you held hands. Now you tell them about that and see how they take it. Not talking about you being intimate with the other person at all. Maybe they just don't want any visuals of that in their head. Having a clear idea of what the priorities are and how time is going to be allocated. A lot of people feel more safe if they know they have dedicated date nights that are just for them, or if they know that they have a certain type of need or a certain type of emergency that you're going to respond in a specific kind of way. Usually, curiosity helps people feel a lot more safe. If you also can't be very emotionally safe if you can't remember what your partners have told you. When they tell you that something hurts them or something matters to them, if you have difficulty with memory, consider taking notes and setting reminders for yourself. Working on your nutrition and other factors that contribute to this, such as how often you check your phone. Because if your partner does communicate their boundaries and their needs, and you forget about it a week or 2 months later, this doesn't absolve you from rupturing a sense of safety and connection with you. Most importantly, developing relationships and trust between Metamours is what makes Polycules emotionally safe for everybody. Somebody can't make me feel safe without knowing me. If I have a Metamour that I don't know and I don't have contact with them, how can they possibly actually have my best interest in mind? Having my partner have to speak for me to my Metamour about my needs is not going to make me feel as safe because I don't know for sure what's been communicated and if it was received and genuinely understood. I don't know for sure if the other person is aware of the agreements that we have made. This is a common pitfall of more network style or looser ethical non-monogamy. You are relying on the word of your partner about what is actually being said or transpiring between them and other people. If they really genuinely have nothing to hide, it raises the question of why can't you have direct relationships with your Metamours? You and your Metamours should be able to talk all the time about anything you guys want to talk about, and there shouldn't be a problem. This is true, genuine, full transparency, and this is something that I personally need in order to feel safe in relationships. I once had a long conversation with somebody who was used to monogamy and they could not imagine the idea of polyamory. To them, it sounded terrifying. They liked threesomes, but they wanted there to be no emotional intimacy. I painted it for them this way, hypothetically. Imagine that you had two girlfriends and they were both totally into each other and they were totally into you and you loved both of them. And he's like, well, that would be amazing. And I'm like, okay, well, imagine they also love each other. And he's like, that's cool, that's great. And I'm like, now imagine sometimes they want to go on a date, just the two of them. And he's like, well, I don't know about that. And I'm like, okay, but you trust both of them and you love both of them. And you get to be with them all the time as much as you want. Maybe they want to go on a date together on a night that you're already going to go play Magic with your friends. And he's like, yeah, I can see that being okay. And I'm like, okay, now imagine sometimes the two of them make love and you're not present. And he's like, oh, I don't know about that. I'm like, okay, well, now imagine you walk in on them, they're making love, and they immediately welcome you in. And he's like, wow, yeah, that would be fine. I mean, if I can always join in whenever I want, that would be great. What is happening here? There's as much trust and intimacy and knowing between all parties. Imagine that you and your partner have another partner, and maybe you're not romantic with that other partner, but imagine you're so completely emotionally comfortable with them that if they walk in, or if you walk in on literally anything happening, imagine there isn't a bunch of awkwardness. Imagine that you guys can all just talk and laugh about anything. Imagine there aren't any secrets, that they are completely trustworthy. Now, what is there to fear? So asking what there is to fear is important in all relationships. Knowing what it is that you're specifically afraid of happening can diffuse so many arguments. Whether you're feeling angry or jealous or anxious or insecure, there's something you're afraid of happening. It's either currently happening right now, which you already are afraid of, in progress, or it seems like it's about to happen. Because of that, you're having these feelings. And as soon as other people become curious about what it is that you're afraid of, and you actually feel understood. It's important that you feel understood first before we get to problem solving. Now the fear starts to dissipate. These other people are on your side. And here's the crazy thing. Even if they aren't able to resolve the problem, if they're able to understand it and be on your side about trying to solve it, that's usually enough. Start working on, okay, what's actionable? How can we make this safe for you? Just knowing that another person is genuinely on your side is so soothing and healing to the nervous system. Let's bring this all together now. What exactly is polyfidelity? Polyfidelity is a style under the giant umbrella of ethical non-monogamy, falling also under the umbrella of polyamory. Polyfidelity is a consensus-based process where every person who enters the Polycule is unanimously accepted into the group. Members of the Polycule may at any point call for a revision of the agreements, and they may call for a revisiting of the housing arrangements or anything else. And the other members are hopefully mature enough to respond with curiosity. Polyfidelity is my chosen way of existing in this world. I hope that because of this video, you will consider it as something valid and wonderful that exists in the world, even if it's not for you, or maybe you'll consider it for yourself. We've talked a lot about the facets of emotional safety and how they vary. What makes people feel safe is honoring their boundaries to the best of your ability, without harming your selfhood and generating resentment. Everything that makes a person uniquely themselves is a boundary. Which is why making a person feel emotionally safe is unique to that individual. And this is why getting to know a person deeply is essential to being able to show that person love. Because to love someone is to caretake their boundaries as if they are part of your own boundaries. Thus, in my strong opinion, loving many people should automatically mean having many loyalties. To me, polyfidelity as a term describes what polyamory should mean. Many loves, many loyalties. Furthermore, this is how I believe all social structures should optimally function. Get to know people deeply. Do our best to respect the wishes of the people in our lives while simultaneously putting our truth on the table. Express love in the form of respecting the needs and boundaries, same thing, of everyone around us, everywhere we go. This philosophy expands even beyond human relationships.
May 10th, 2012. We, in a relationship, face one particularly difficult trial, our fear butting up against the fear of the other person in the relationship. In such a situation, no action can be taken that feels fair to both parties, unless at least one party can be cured of their fear in that particular area.
Fear is the root of all conflicts. I have a lot more to say when it comes to love, polyamory, relationships, community, social evolution, developmental trauma, neurotypology, and neurodivergence on my website. So swing by Raederle.com to see my collection of essays. I doubt that our indigenous predecessors really knew how much they had to lose when it came to the agricultural and industrial revolutions. We traded away our social technology in the pursuit of increased material security. The consensus process and relational boundaries aren't new concepts, but growing into them, post-industrialism, is its own cultural revolution. We are reclaiming and rebuilding what it means to be a community and a family. The cure for the modern-day epidemic of loneliness isn't another online platform or outreach program. The cure is radically shifting our paradigm away from the Western notion of independence and moving toward reciprocal caretaking of each other's boundaries. Maybe you aren't ready to love your enemies or even your neighbors, but today I'm asking you, can you work to include your partner's boundaries as part of your own? I'd like to just take a moment to appreciate where we are. We've gotten to this amazing place where we can talk about emotional safety. I mean, this is amazing. The fact that we can even have these conversations, that we can care about these things, that we get to care about our partners in this way, it's beautiful and incredible. So it's a cool chart, but as I said, take it with a grain of salt. I would love to hear all about in the comments where exactly you fall on this chart and how it does or doesn't vibe for you. So I'm Raederle, and this has been a video about polyfidelity and how to create emotional safety in relationships in general. I hope that you will introspect about what it is that makes you feel emotionally safe in relationships, and that you will express lots of curiosity towards your partner or maybe just towards your friends, asking what would make them feel more safe. I might do a Q&A video answering your questions, so please do post all the questions you have below. I really want to hear from you all about your relational experiences and how this has all landed for you. I hope you have a wonderful day and week, and that you have many great conversations with people close to you. Looking forward to hearing from you. If you want to support my channel and have more direct interaction with me, consider becoming one of my patrons on Patreon. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, share this video. Let's make that relational revolution a reality. And if that wasn't enough R's for you, I'm Raederle.
Raederle.
Signing off.
Signing off.